Welcome everyone to the STEAM 2.0 6 and 6 and Emily Underwood. First, I want to talk about the 6 and 6 team. As founding director of Images Sound Group, Sarah E. Clark manages creative arts initiatives that make the world a better place, including art science initiatives, children's literature, video and animation projects in K-12 education, public health, environmental conservation, and animal welfare. As a fluent Spanish speaker born and raised in Southern California, all of her work focuses deeply on promoting multi-culturalism, multi-lingualism, the questioning of rules, and the dissolving of borders. Eric Magrane, a geographer and a poet, is an assistant professor in the Department of Geography at New Mexico State University, where he teaches human and cultural geography. Magrane is a co-editor of both the Sonoran Desert, a literary field guide, University of Arizona Press, 2016, and Geopoetics in Practice, Routledge, 2020. His scholarly and creative works have appeared in Ecotone, Literary Geographies, Cultural Geographies, GeoHumanities, Antipode, the International Encyclopedia of Human Geography. Ben Wilder's research is broadly focused in desert ecology and biogeography. He utilizes multiple approaches and timescales to establish baselines to better understand modern biodiversity and connect science to conservation. He is the director of the Desert Laboratory in Tumamic Hill, director and co-founder of the Next Generation Sonoran Desert Researchers, and interim director of the Consortium for Arizona-Mexico Arid Environment, CASMEX, at the University of Arizona. I leave the floor to them.
Super. Okay. Hi, everyone. Sarah Clark here. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you so much again to the organizers for the invitation. And we're delighted to share this space with Emily. I'm excited to see her work in a few minutes. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And if you could give me a thumbs up, can you see the, okay, perfect. All right, so we are going to be presenting today on our art science experiment called 6 and 6. It brought together 6 artists and 6 scientists to make works of art about the Sonoran Desert. And these 6 images you see here are some snapshots from the final artwork. 6 and 6 was housed under this organization, Next Generation Sonoran Desert Researchers, of which Ben, one of the other presenters today, is the director. And I wanted to read the mission statement of the 6 and 6 initiative to you all. It was a collaboration between artists and scientists to explore the patterns and processes of the Sonoran Desert and the Gulf of California in order to impart a deeper appreciation of this region. There's a link in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, ngen6and6.com. And what that'll take you to is a website that we created that was implemented as an interactive touchscreen exhibit during the final show. So people who attended the show could click on the artwork that they were interested in and then get a behind the scenes look at the art process, the science process, all of the activities in the field or in the lab that the collaborators did leading up to the production of the final work of art. And so that website is still live and you can check it out. I've been told it's really fun to flip around on. And let's see, go to the next slide. There we go. So we published a paper in Bioscience this last September about our project. I've included the citation and a link to the article. One note about the word transdisciplinary. So this was really important to our group. What made this particular art science initiative transdisciplinary? Well, what that meant is that through the design of our project, the participants were able to transcend the traditional boundaries between their disciplines. So usually we have arts over here and science over here. And through the design of 6 and 6, the participants, the artist-scientist pairs, worked together to design their project, implement and create their art project, and thereby really blend the two approaches, the arts and the sciences, and blend them into a unique approach. We go into great detail about what exactly a transdisciplinary approach to art-science collaboration looks like in our paper. But the one other thing we wanted to underline here is just really how important we feel a transdisciplinary collaboration of this nature is right now, given the incredibly complex issues, environmental issues we're facing in the 21st century. And so we're really excited that you students are interested in this topic, and we think that there's just so much opportunity in this area. Here is a map of the locations of our different art science projects all throughout the desert, the Sonoran Desert and the Gulf of California. This is a really, really magical part of the planet. So if you're not familiar with this area, I highly, highly recommend a trip down there. And here are a few more images of our final show. You'll see that the 6 artist-scientist pairs used a great variety of media in their final artwork. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have a painting. In the upper right-hand corner, we have these amazing photographs that were printed on silk screens. And that's me behind the behind the silk screen. Bottom left-hand corner, these are light boxes that a geologist collaborated on. Bottom right-hand corner, this was a really huge map that was created of a river that runs through Tucson and included photographs and so forth of the aquatic life in the river. And in the center, up towards the top, this was a project, this was just one piece of a larger installation where the artist printed the genetic code of a lizard, the name of which I'm forgetting, but that's the genetic code of this particular reptile, and it's printed on sheets of mica, which also had a connection to the desert. And then right in the center, we have a video installation of bycatch. And so people could see images and video of bycatch while they enjoyed their shrimp cocktail. And Ben and Eric will be talking about their involvement in a couple of these different projects in just a moment. Here are some more pictures from our final show, which was at the University of Arizona in Tucson. You can see the public enjoying the space. It was open for about 3 months in total, I believe, if I remember correctly. And with that, I will turn it over to Eric, who will talk about his specific project with Maria.
Great, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Jeff and Diego and Anna and Emily. We're looking forward to hearing about your work and engaging in this conversation. You know, I love these art science interactions, and that's one of the reasons that I was really drawn to this 6x6 project and collaboration. You know, I think that we really, need to think about the role that these sort of transdisciplinary projects, can play in creating new futures, right? And the physical and social sciences help us to, understand and make sense of the physical world and how we interact with each other. And the arts and humanities are really important to deepen and texture that understanding. And I think they play a really important role in helping us to think about empathy and the role of empathy and thinking in terms of relationship in imagining positive futures. And that's what I come back to when I think about the 6x6 project and when I think about art science in general, my hopes for these kinds of works, and why I'm very heartened to hear about the work that you're doing in Monterey. So My project that was part of the 6x6 project was a collaboration with Maria Johnson. And you can see a few images on the screen of us and some students that were working with us from Prescott College's Kino Bay Center for Cultural and Ecological Studies. And Maria is part of a long-term project that has been documenting the rate of bycatch in in the shrimp trawler industry in the Gulf of California. So bycatch is a term for all the species caught who are not the target species, right? So in this case, everything that isn't shrimp. And the project has collected data for many years documenting bycatch in the shrimp trawler fisheries. And what that looks like is essentially field research where we get on the boat in the afternoon or evening and spend all night on the boat, basically like knee deep in writhing fish. I'm luckily not knee deep in writhing fish right now, but I put that behind me on the screen as I present. Weighing and documenting that bycatch, which is about 80 to 90% by weight of the catch in this industry. So it's a lot of waste. And we started to thinking about in our 6x6 project and in our collaboration, like how we would, how we could represent that and how we could think with what was happening on this boat and make sense of it, right? And represent it to the public. So I played the artist and Maria played the scientist. So, officially she was the scientist of the pair and I was the artist of the pair. But in our case, neither of us firmly fit into those categories. A lot of what you traditionally think of as the art was done by Maria, the visual art. And I drew on my human geography background and thinking about what was happening there, and drew on my poetry background. And ultimately, what we decided to do in this project was to create an installation that really helped people who interacted with it to get a feel for what is happening on these trawlers, and to connect the food systems of the Sonoran Desert in Tucson, where, yeah, perfect, thank you, Sarah, where we had the exhibit that Sarah spoke about, with the larger, regional food shed, I guess we'd say, or the food system in the Gulf. So what we did, we had a number of aspects of the installation. You can see in the center here, this kind of like bar table scene. We got these, napkins that were kind of like the color of shrimp. And I got to practice my old folding napkins practice from the days when I was, bartending and waiting tables. And we got these shrimp cocktails. So they're not real shrimp cocktails, but, kind of like small sculptures of shrimp cocktails. Sat that up. So it was like this inviting scene for visitors to the exhibit to sit in. And then on the wall, we played this large video loop, essentially, of images of fish and images of the bycatch. There were a number of nights when I was out on the, one night actually, when I was out on the trawler with a GoPro, taking video of the pile of fish. So we had that and the sounds going on the wall. And what you can see on the right in this screen, that's a shovel-nosed guitarfish. And then we did this series of drawings that you'll see on the far wall that Maria did, that we actually used as the front part of a set of trading cards that we produced. So we made these limited edition bycatch trading cards, and it's kind of like a oxymoron, because bycatch by definition is kind of like valueless, right? But by making these limited edition trading cards, we put value on them. And one side of the trading card had an image, the other side had a short excerpt of a poem and some information on that species. So through this project, we were trying to think about empathy towards the non-human bodies, right, that are caught up in this in this fishing industry. So what I'd like to do is just finish by sharing one of the poems, so you get a feel for the type, what the poems sounded like. And these were also playing as part of the exhibit, as part of the video. And I'm going to read the poem that was actually written, directed to the shovel-nosed guitarfish, which is the fish that you can see up on the screen to the right. So I'll read this poem and then I'll turn it over to Ben after that. Shovel-nosed guitarfish. The rhythm of the boat rocks your fins like a Stratocaster, only quiet, not plugged in yet. The amp, then with reverb, pedals on the boat, deck where you'll be tossed into a basket. Maybe it's better than being shoveled out the hatch where the lobos and pelicanos wait, though your name also reminds me of Picasso, 3 musicians fragmented. This pile of fish, maybe cubist space, is the best way of approaching it, this assemblage on the deck of a boat in the Gulf of California, where humans take shovels like snow shovels clearing a path after a storm and scrape surplus life out those openings. At least that is not you. You will be in a basket and then onto shore and maybe into the fish taco that I will later order, and I won't think of your eyes with stars for pupils, your soft body in my fish-stained gloves, cold hands, the rhythm of your slow gestation, more like a bass line than lead guitar, or the dumb luck of spatial and temporal overlap where you gather, like you're ready for the nets, like the nets maybe would be a vacation from the long maturation. But the way they drag up everything in their path, And I'll hand it over to Ben.
Thanks, Eric. That's such a great poem. Really takes you there. Cool. Well, I think Sarah and Eric did an awesome job of describing kind of the 2 tiers of collaborations we were really pushing towards with the 6 and 6 project, and the 1 tier being the cohort of the 6 projects and the way that they connected together to reimagine, as the vision statement said, kind of and reestablish connections for people and to tell the stories of the Sonoran Desert and Gulf of California, which really interesting enough, we didn't know how all these pieces would come together. It was a grand experiment. I mean, we just, have the different pairings and go forth and do the work. And Eric just shared his project and I'll share mine in a second. And then at the end, I mean, I'll never forget the first time I walked through the space in the gallery and to see how all these, what started as ideas collectively, but then emerged over 2 years of work and then reassembled themselves in the museum space. And it just fit so beautifully together. And it really was walking, as you walked through the gallery space and visited each one of the exhibits or the works, you were just in these little bubbles, these dimensionless spaces that transport you to that concept. And I think that kind of fundamental cohort collaborative approach that we took to the project manifested itself in that space and having this cohesiveness together. The other tier is the collaborations that evolved amongst themselves within the artist-scientist pair. And Eric just did an awesome job of presenting his and Maria's experience with the Bycatch project. And I worked with Ben Johnson, and we did play a bit more maybe of the artist-scientist roles, where he is an exquisite kind of photorealist painter by training. And I am a botanist, desert ecologist by training, where we both come with a whole life of trainings that that then inform our approaches and then educate one another. And the topic that we addressed were these freshwater springs in the middle of the Gran Desierto. And the Gran Desierto is the largest extent of sand dunes and desert, kind of this arid core of the Sonoran Desert, the largest extent of sand dunes in North America. So just had to throw in a little map here to just help orient people. You can see the area of focus is the upper Gulf of California. And this area here is just all sand. But you get these uprisings. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. You're the one sharing the screen. Yes, I was putting my mouse there. And and so, but in the area just near the coast, you see the image on the bottom left is that heron taking flight from this pool of water. This is the only fresh water that occurs in any hundreds of kilometers. And there have been just kind of fundamental questions about this space of such as, where does the water come from? How old is the water? But at the same time, a lot of known entities and not known at the same time, where these was being the only water in this arid portion of the desert, is a gathering space, a confluent space for so much life, and especially people. And so the images on the right there, you see, this is just some of the archaeology that's just on the edge of these springs, from pottery to obsidian points. Those little pieces on the notebook are pottery, oysters, crab claws cooked. And so this area is on the edge of the upper Colorado River, and especially the delta of the Colorado River, which before damming was one of the most productive, biologically and ecologically productive places on the globe. This was just teeming with life. And so there's this paradox of what was a very harsh environment now, but when you can picture that the only limiting presence for people living in this region thousands of years ago was fresh water, well, here's the water, and here's the evidence of people. And so there's this this element of time that we were really playing with a lot, and how this space has changed over time, and how we relate with areas of, and how we as desert societies relate to water now. And to that effect, there is a coastal highway that was put in 2007 that just goes through the dunes. It's a shortcut, kind of from Mexicali or Tijuana area down with more central Sonora, and it just skirts on the edges of these salt flats and these springs now, where used to be where people are just driving by not even knowing they're there. So you have this, again, this paradox of people. This used to be the most important, the destination site for thousands of years. This is so much a destination site that this was the coming of age ceremony for the Tana Atam, the indigenous nation here in this part of the desert, that they would, young men would walk days and days over hundreds of miles to the coast to gather salt, and to come back as a coming of age ceremony, to the point now where today the people are just driving by and not even knowing that's there. So we address those questions of age and origin of the water by using stable isotope data. That's the image you can see there with the bottles. And I won't get into the science piece there, but we attack this from all these angles. And so with the art, with how would you tell this story? And at first, Ben and I worked a lot in talking about wanting to overlay and have multiple layers within the creative pieces that we showed. So thinking about having paintings that had not just an image, but all these overlaid images and some of the stable isotope kind of plots and the archaeological renderings, and trying to be very kind of abstract and merging time together. And we were going down that direction for a while. And then I remember Ben we had a call, and I just thought it was a regular check-in, which it was, but he said, I'm thinking about this differently. I think rather than kind of forcing the narrative we want, let's let the place speak for itself. And that was really interesting, because as a scientist, I'm often wanting to thinking about the papers are right, or the questions I'm answering. I want to try to provide an answer to the question, and say, okay, this was what we didn't know going in, but now we understand it this way. And Ben pushed back on that and said, I want people to be able to make their own stories, and to have their own connections to the place, that not just necessarily what we're telling them. And that was pretty profound for me, because as a scientist, my inclinations aren't always in that direction. But that really resonated in a wonderful way. So the direction we went is what, excuse me, what you're seeing there on the screen, which is this, again, this portal of, I mean, just even that vantage point there, I'm like, feel like I'm getting sucked into the image and just being transported to the Pozos. And when you sit there, pretty much right where Tim Fuller took that photo, it's like, it really is kind of this amazing portal that you just kind of feel connected to that space. And so that's what, and so it was complicated because there's so many layers we wanted to pull out and to kind of push into this, but ultimately kind of letting you, the viewer, connect with that area. And the images on the side, the video monitors, are telling a couple different stories. One is a combination on the right there of a time lapse of all the different wildlife visitors that are coming to this spring, morphed together. And then on the left is a image taken in 1912 that we matched with the current image, but did a 24-hour time lapse of that image that then showed, as it went to night, you can see the traffic on the highway coming up behind it, and kind of can see how the space has changed, but not changed, but changed over time. And then, but again, connecting with the view of the Pozos. So I would say that this, the work continues with both Ben and I. We are now pulling on the threads of human presence in this region and looking at another archaeological site in the region. And I'd say this is the 6 and 6 collaboration is both at one point kind of culminated in the show, but also continues in it, the inspiration it's given all of us as participants and the friendships it's created, and just, you know, being able to continue to work with Eric and Sarah in this presentation is a great example of that too. So I'll pause there. And thanks for having us.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll just say a couple words to wrap up. Yeah, as Ben mentioned, you know, a number of, in addition to the artwork that was created for this project, the pairs also have written papers together. They've presented at other conferences together. We've heard from some of the scientists in the collaboration that they're pursuing new lines of investigation that they wouldn't have done had they not participated in the Art Science Initiative. So it's, I think 6 and 6 really demonstrates how this type of transdisciplinary work has an impact, kind of a lasting, unexpected, and very interesting impact in the participants. And so here's our contact information if you ever want to get in touch. And also, one last thing about our paper is that we put together a kind of detailed list of recommendations if you are interested in implementing and creating an art science initiative of your own. So we have some pointers about how to do that, and just look forward to staying in touch with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much for talking with us and coming today. And the work that you do with 6 and 6 is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Next, we have Emily Underwood. Emily Underwood is an artist and educator based in Central California. Blending her background in both science and art, she explores the natural world and its landscape histories through the mediums of painting, printmaking, and bookmaking. She also creates illustrations and interpretive artwork for researching scientists, museums, parks, and other agencies, and teaches natural history illustration at UC Santa Cruz.
Hi,
All yours.
can everyone hear me? I'm going to try to do the screen share now. Okay. Hold on. Where'd it go? Just a minute. Can people see that? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's the basic introduction. I like to paint outside, and I also like to explore landscapes. My background's in geology, and I just am going to talk a little bit about some of the projects I've done that have been mainly self-initiated and self-published, and then kind of how some of these projects have led into other things. So a lot of this work that I've been doing has been inspired by a technology called a risograph machine. And I don't know if anybody has heard of this, a risograph machine. And I did a residency a couple years ago in the Netherlands. That's a picture on the top. And also worked with a friend up in Bolinas who does a community newspaper. And so I'm really interested in DIY publishing. And basically what a risograph is it looks like a copy machine where paper passes beneath like these drums that have colored ink. You can kind of see them in the back. So each color gets printed separately with soy ink. And so it's really a cheap way to make publications. And so I got really into this technology, and this piece right here was one of the pieces I made when I was a resident in Amsterdam. And I really wanted to tie it into this other project I called Reading the Landscape of California. And I'll show, oh wait, let me go back. So this is basically just a little bit of the process of how the images get built up with this technology. So I like to paint outside. I'm a plein air painter. And so I'll explore a landscape and make sketches and drawings and paintings, and then sort of translate this through the different colors. So each, like I was explaining, when you want to print a different color, you take the drum out and put a different color drum in. And I like to build the images up like a painting. And so you can kind of see this isn't the actual, this is like what the computer file looks like. So it's like these kind of gray scale images that you print up in different colors, and then they add together to make an image. And so this one was one that I had a woman who's a writer and a geologist write about palm oases. And so this is sort of the image that went with it. So this is the project that I have been kind of working on that's taken different forms. I call it Reading the Landscape of California. And one of the goals of this zine is to like look at the different landscapes and kind of have the reader think about them in geologic time, and not just geology, but also like what plants were here before, what people were here before. And I also been experimenting with this sort of like graphic, sort of cartoon way of telling stories. So I've been sort of incorporating that in, and making these books that I just send to people or give out or sell at different places. And it's been really fun to work on this. I also made this little zine about the geology of Point Lobos using the same machine, the same technology, because I was giving, I've been to Point Lobos a lot on geologic field trips, and was leading a group, and I wanted to make something that I could hand out for people to have so they could understand the really cool history there and the turbidite sequence. I had Fred, I think who's on here, review this for me and give me some tips on how to make it more accurate or communicate the story better. And so I made this and I gave it out at a conference, which was really cool. People really liked it. And they asked me to put in a proposal to do the interpretive signs. So I don't know if some of you have been to Point Lobos, but there's like a kiosk near the bathroom, and we're doing a whole bunch of new signs for it. And here's a preview of the artwork that, this is just the artwork. I'm working with a woman who's putting all kinds of like text on it. And so this is still not finished, but I wanted to show you guys what that project turned into. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was incorporate the geology in and show like how the tide pools like take advantage of certain parts of the rock types and stuff like that. So I was thinking that was sort of interesting just to show the evolution of a project and how it turns into something else. And these are big watercolors. Oh yeah, and in stuff like this, I always like to show some ideas for a future project aspirations that kind of tie into what we've been talking about with, I was reading about your group doing animations and stuff like that. And so one of the future projects I want to do is that I want to make a big cake that illustrates the California geology, and you could cut into slices of it, or maybe it wouldn't be the whole state, but someplace that was like geologically interesting. And I also want to make stop animation movies in claymation or however else, and thinking that something like this could I don't know. This is what I aspire to do when people start getting back together again. COVID's over, but that's what I've been working on. So I hope that gives you enough overview. How do
Emily,
I-
thank you so very much. Your artwork's incredible.
Oh, thank you. I'm just trying to figure out how to unshare my screen now. Sorry. Oops. Oops.
There should be a red button at the top that says stop share.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm in, oh, I'm in some, oh yeah, there we go, stop share. Thank you.
Yeah, your artwork is absolutely incredible. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
All right, I'm going to pass the mic over to Diego Espinoza from El Centro, and he's going to have some questions for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Like Jeff was mentioning, it's so inspiring, the collaboration, and then, the careers that each one of you has and the different projects that you have, and then how it really ties into the Monterey Peninsula where college is located. So we did have some questions that were submitted previously to today, but at this point, I also want to offer up to our colleagues and our students to feel free to type in any questions into the chat. We'll keep track of those questions, and then we'll make sure to ask those questions as well. So the first question is for Emily. And Emily, where do you find the motivation or inspiration for the different pieces of art that you have?
For me, it's really easy because that's all from being outside. And I think each project starts from wanting to get to understand a place better. I read a lot of books. I like to do a lot of painting. I'm very self-directed, but I also love to go out with people who have spent a lot of time in a landscape or have a different understanding or history of it. And so I would say, yeah, in addition to just learning from other people, also just exploring and curiosity of my own.
And a follow-up to that, is there anyone or any specific style that has influenced your work?
For a person, actually, I started taking, I took 2 printmaking classes at MPC. I'd never done any printmaking before. And I don't know if any of you guys know Mai Runo. She now has an artist shop down on Lighthouse called Playful Ground. But her approach to creativity, she was a great teacher for me because, first of all, I learned about how to do printmaking and kind of like delved into that really seriously after that class, but also just her sort of like, she has a very yes attitude, and like, if you want to do it, we can always figure out a way, and so her teaching was really helpful for me, and also because she's from MPC, so that was cool. Yeah, and also just like all kinds of landscape painters, all different styles, all different traditions. I do a lot of oil painting as well as, a lot of the beginnings of some of the artwork that I translate into like the zines starts from oil painting. And so I'm just inspired by all kinds of artists.
Thank you so much, Emily. And then we have some follow-up questions from our audience. Can someone purchase this reading, The Landscapes of California?
Yes, except for currently, I usually sell them on my website, and currently I'm away from my studio, so I don't have any, but if anybody wants to purchase one and wants to email me, then next time I'm back, I can mail. I don't have the first one anymore. I have the second one. And I do at some point want to reprint the Geology of Point Lobos. I need to get access to a machine again, but I have plans to do that as well at some point. So if anyone's interested, I can put my email and my website in the chat. Would that be a good thing to do? And then people can get in touch with me that way.
Yeah, that's awesome, Emily. Thank you. And then one more follow-up question for Emily from Eric. I love the idea of the cake. Do you have any early ideas about what flavors you'd match up with the different geologic areas?
Well, I also want them to be puns. So I don't know. The ideas, I'm like, I have ideas, but at this point they're all sort of like joke ideas. I mean, I was thinking like red velvet cake would be good with like some kind of like for the volcanic area, like Modoc Plateau, and like maybe something green for like the Franciscan area. Funfetti cake maybe for granite. I don't know. But then I also, We should talk about it because it's got to be fun. It's got to have funny names too, I think.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Emily. And we have anybody feel free to unmute yourself at any point if you have any questions. So for the 6x6 team, our first question is, how did you all come up with the idea of starting this project, and what was the process of putting that into action? And then as a follow-up to that, was there any hesitation at some point of bringing together this collaboration?
Ben, would you like to speak to the birth of 6 and 6?
Sure, yeah, happy to. It's actually kind of remarkable in how it came about. There was an artist here in Tucson named Keith Magrane who began with the project and ended up not being able to finish it with us. But I had been told about Keith from a couple different colleagues and friends and vice versa. Anyway, we finally connected. This was in 2014, and we had coffee, and this is not an exaggeration. Within 15 minutes of us meeting each other, we had the concept and the name and the whole thing like hashed out. It was just nuts. I think we'd been thinking on similar wavelengths about that. The power to connect artists and scientists is huge. We're not doing that very well in the desert, and there's just some ingredients that can come together. Anyway, it was just like it emerged. And the second piece of that, Diego, was the inspiration, or remind me of the second part.
Oh, Diego,
You're muted, sorry.
But I think it was about any hesitation about a project. And the first thing that came to my mind was just this.
Sarah, you can take over. My internet's being weird.
Oh, sure. Yeah, just to talk a little bit more about this question of any hesitation for the project. I think the scale of 6 and 6 was much larger than folks were expecting or planning on. So, the project extended over 3 years, an average of 3 years, and the number of hours that the artists and the scientists both put in to each of their individual projects was really staggering. Everyone was very, very satisfied and proud of the final result. But that is one of our big learnings from the project is when you're shaping a transdisciplinary project of this nature, you do actually have to allot for a significant amount of time. For something to truly be transdisciplinary, you're not going to be able to just whip something out in a year. Like the melding of the different disciplines and the different approaches that we were talking about and that Ben and Eric both illustrated so beautifully with their own experience, it takes time and it takes a lot of effort. So giving participants realistic expectations about what exactly is going to be involved in this type of project, I think is really important.
I so agree. Sorry, Eric, I'll just say one quick thing. I just so agree with you said, Sarah, in that I would just add that the cohort building up front in terms of taking the time at the beginning to, I mean, the first time we met is we did pretty much an all-day picnic where just each person went around and just shared their approach and their perspective to their work and just about who they were. And we became friends and got to know each other before we even started going into the work. That was the work. It was all fun. But I think that just to Sarah's point, it's like, you got to build such strong building blocks for these kind of bigger, more collaborative, long-term efforts.
And I'll just add two quick things. One is that the pairs weren't formed at the beginning. So through that process of getting to know each other and finding where the affinities were, that's where we that's where we decided what artist was going to be paired with which scientist. There was a process involved with that. And the other thing I'll just say is that, and Ben knows more from the kind of the administrative side of the 6x6, but the project had a lot more initial response and interest from artists wanting to be involved than scientists wanting to be involved. And one of the challenges in these projects is precisely that. And that's connected with how scientists and artists, how their, how different work that they do is valued, right? And the amount of time that they have, right? So that's something to keep in mind, like what are the, what are the roles and the enticements for scientists versus artists for these types of projects.
Thank you so much. Emily?
I just wanted to say something related to that, because where I teach up at UC Santa Cruz, we have a center called the Norris Center, and my friend Juniper and I teach a natural history illustration class that's in the environmental studies department, and there's an art science residency program that started. And so what we do all year is pair scientists with artists, and it's been really interesting because the more that people have heard about it, the more inquiries we actually get from scientists that are looking for students. And so I can send you guys webs. I'll put it in the chat thing here. It might be interesting to you guys to see, because it's very similar to what you guys are doing, and it takes forms of just like maybe illustrations for a paper, and also kind of like more abstract sculptural installations. And so it might be interesting to look through at some point.
Thank you so much. One question for everyone is, how do you go about getting funding for these projects?
You want to go first, Emily?
I just don't. I just do them anyway and hope that it works out. I find that my illustration work is things that was where I get money to, pay for my projects that I like to do on my own. I find that thinking a lot about how to pay for something takes the fun out of it. And so whenever I can, I just hope that it works out. But it's one of the hardest things about being an artist, is always feeling like you have to sell in order to validate making it in the first place. And I feel like that's a huge struggle, and I reject that. So I think sometimes it's important to just work on projects that you want to do independently, and then see where the funding can come later. That's worked out for me personally, but I know that there's also more formal channels to get funding for things, and I'd love to hear more about that too.
Thank you, Emily. Sarah, Eric, Ben, anything to add?
So for us on the funding side, I think we kept costs pretty low, was the main thing. And I think there's two different models, I guess, among many, but maybe having people get properly compensated for their efforts, or having the bare minimum to make it happen. And we went for the latter, which, I mean, it's a part of the discussion. I mean, and both, Sarah, you alluded to it very well, is that there was a ton of time. I mean, this was a heavy lift by everybody involved at every stage. That, I mean, for the art, I mean, for everybody involved, is like, I think there are times it's like, how the hell am I justifying the amount of time I'm putting in this monetarily? And you ultimately couldn't, right? But it is, just like you said, Emily, so much more than that. So we had an investment by a philanthropist, patron of the arts here in Tucson, for $5,000 that allowed us to kind of cover $750 of cost for each project, and then a little bit of group efforts, and then was able to fundraise on the side. And Sarah and I worked collaboratively in getting support for her efforts to document, and then we created a catalog and went to a local kind of essentially Cox Communications here, who does support for the local art scene a bit, and got some money from them to print the catalogs. We had a entity on campus that also provided some money for publishing and printing the catalog. So honestly, in the end, the catalog was the main source of the funds, which in retrospect, I'm like, wait, that should have gone to people more than paper. But anyway, the other thing to mention that was a major challenge, and this isn't quite funding, but it's a little bit related, was getting the gallery space and having someone take a chance on us in terms of exhibiting the space, I was so naive going into that. And ultimately, it was Eric who helped make a connection with who was at that time, he was the director of the Museum of Art, and Burns was his last name, James Burns. And he just kind of was like, all right, I'm taking a chance on you, because normally you show the gallery your final art pieces, you're a known entity, they have a very clear idea of what it's gonna be. And the best we could say is, we think we're gonna focus on these topics and we have no idea what the media is or what it's gonna look like. And that was like the best we could say. And anyway, having organizations or individuals in positions of leadership that can take the gamble on that work is awesome, and just a game changer. And so finding those people out, or those organizations, is pretty wonderful.
Thank you so much, Ben. And we have time for one more question. If there's a question from the audience, feel free to raise your hand or mute. Or I have a question that I'm personally really intrigued about. But I'll allow the audience to unmute themselves if they have a question. Okay, so my question is there, so the 6 and 6 project was focusing on the Sonoran Desert and the Gulf of California, correct? And Emily, you have done a lot of work in the Magrane Peninsula. Is there a site around the world that you would like to further explore through like the 6 and 6 666 project, or Emily, for you, a site that you would like to draw or that you would like to work in?
What a good question. We're all stumped and thinking about it. But while others are thinking about it, one thing that I'll say is I think the question picks up on something really important, that a lot of these projects are very much place-based, right? And we look at this, and we discussed this a little bit in that bioscience article, and we really, all shared whether we were artists or scientists, a love for the Sonoran Desert and Gulf of California and some sort of attachment to that place. And the process gave us, a way to deepen that attachment. And Emily, we just virtually met, but I could, like, the image that you showed of the sign that you're working on. That's very much located in place. So, as a geographer, as a cultural geographer, I think that organizing these projects around places is one way that they go really well. And there are lots of examples of that from there's like a writer in residence program through the NSF has in Antarctica. I'm what's the word looking for, that you're like trying not to answer the question, because I can't think of the exact space that I want to go to, but I'm thinking about like how cool that question is. So I'm thinking about it for another moment, because maybe Ben or Emily or Sarah figured out where they would answer that question.
I find that when I spend a lot of time in a place, I know this is kind of, so like spending so much time looking at Point Lobos and the geology recently made me really want to see what is below the water, the canyons and stuff around there. And I get really seasick, so I can't do like snorkeling or scuba diving, but I started talking to people who have explored beneath the surface of the ocean. We were talking about how cool it would be to do some illustration and do some artwork based on that. So it's kind of the same place, but another dimension of it, I guess.
Thank you, Emily.
I love that question. And it, well, I feel like both of you, Emily and Eric, you hit on the elements that are part of it. For me, it's a place that captivates you, that is, you want to explore more of, but that's like deeply resonant about, what inspires you. Emily, you answered the question, one of the first questions of what is this all about? What is your inspiration? It's like being out there, doing it, your interactions with the world, hiking, being outside. And I think the other element here is like, I think two other pieces that answer the question is where there's just natural community, and maybe it's a little fragmented, but like there's just all the ingredients are there and it can just combust. And that's one of the things that helped facilitate how 6 and 6 took off in its first iteration. And then I would say another element for me is areas that stories need to be told more about. And so what's coming to my mind is focusing still, I mean, I'm so desert centric, it's ridiculous, but I'm kind of honing in even more on the borderlands, and it's particularly the area affected by the wall now, and trying to reverse the narratives that are shaping that landscape right now.
Thank you so much, Ben.
And I'd say just really quickly,
Yes, of course.
no, really, just one last thing in relationship to that. So, I mean, I'm still in the Southwest, but I've lived in New Mexico for a couple of years now, and I've been doing projects around with and around communities in New Mexico, in southern New Mexico, where I am, and also up in some projects in northern New Mexico. So I think it's also the flip side of that question is thinking about how the practice of doing these kinds of projects is a way to get to know a place and engage with community and try to do it in a way that's reciprocal and that is respectful and is a dialogue with that place.
Thank you so much, everyone. Well, with that, thank you so much for the answers to the questions, and I'll pass it on to Jeff to bring us to a closing.
I personally, on behalf of myself and Anna and MPC, want to thank all of our presenters so much for coming in and talking with us. The information you passed along is incredible. The artwork is beautiful, and I am honored just to be able to listen to you guys talk. Before we conclude this, I want to give a huge shout out to Elizabeth Thomas for all of her hard work in setting up the website for the STEAM 2.0 event that we are hosting. And I'm also going to put into chat the link so everyone can check it out. There are a bunch of groups on MPC that decided to contribute to this. It's really a very cool virtual library on checking out how everybody sees different things. And if no one has anything else, thank you very much for attending the STEAM 2.0 event.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was fun.
Thank you so much, everyone.